So, for a bit of context, this happened to a close friend of mine, which of course this happened back in 2018. Now, my friend at the time of the story, we'll call her Rachel. Rachel was around, I guess, 25 at the time of the story. It was around, I guess, December sometime, early December of 2018. Rachel lived in pretty much in the middle of nowhere, where pretty much countryside, but of course, the nearest town was about maybe 10, 15 minutes of a drive. Since it was early December, it was around the time before Christmas was coming around. And since she was home from work one day, she was alone because both her parents had gone to go visit her grandparents that lived about a few hours from where she was. So they were going to be out for at least a couple of days. While Rachel was home alone, she was given rules such as don't let anybody in, and if only answer it if it's the mailman or something like that. Rachel had been following the rules and she decided to order a pizza, to which it barely made it to the delivery radius, but they were still able to deliver the pizza. She didn't have her car, yes, but she didn't feel like driving since she didn't feel like driving all the way. While home alone, she was pretty much deciding to work on something on her computer, which of course she was FaceTiming one of her friends. She FaceTimed them for at least a little bit since her other friend was going to work on something for college, so she chat with them for at least 15 minutes. Shortly after the call was done, that was when Rachel ended up looking outside from one of the windows. When she looked outside, she could see that there was just barely anything. It was very dark outside, so that would make sense since it was pretty much around 7 at night. The pizza guy had already delivered, but she was quite curious as to what something was out there. Whatever it was didn't seem to be very, very big, but it looked to be a person. Now, at first she wasn't sure if it was a guy or a woman, or basically man or a woman, but she did look really black. It was all black, so she couldn't really tell what it was since it was too dark for her to see. However, what it was it was walking up a few steps towards the window. At this point, Rachel was panicking, unsure if this was really just some prank or if it was really something else. She really didn't know. She ended up deciding to head back to her room, which she did, and she was considering calling the cops, but she wasn't so sure if that person was still there or not. However, there was no banging on the windows or anything, so it wasn't any burglary. However, she heard the doorbell ring, and she ended up was debating on if she should answer it or not. She had a doorbell camera, but of course, the doorbell camera had been broken for a couple of days, and her parents had meant to fix it. Unsure of what to do, she ended up staying in her room for a little while until she decided that she would check to see if whatever it was gone. She ended up crawling out of her room, looking at every window and door, make sure all the windows are locked. The back door was locked, and she went to check the front door, which of course thankfully it was locked, but she can also see from her porch light there were some footprints in the snow. It looked as if it was a human, but at the same time, it was definitely some footprints that she did not expect to see. At first, she thought that maybe it might have been an animal wandering around or a bear, but she's not sure as to what it was. She didn't even bother to tell her parents about this, thinking maybe her parents would think she's crazy or maybe hallucinating. But she did know for a full-on fact of what she saw, and she's never told anybody about this story because mainly they would think that she's crazy or they wouldn't believe in any words she said. This story still gets her really in chills to this day, and she still wonders what could have been the case if that either that door had been open or she opened that door. God only knows what the alternative would be if she did either of those that night alone. So this took place just recently, sometime in October of 2023. This actually happened to me while my mom was in the hospital. Now, it's not really the type of story to make you jump out of your pants or anything like that, but it's definitely one story that really has me really unsettled. So, my brother was asleep, and I was pretty much alone in my house with my brother. Nothing really bad had ever happened at that place ever since we moved. However, I was pretty much playing on my phone, and when I all of a sudden looked up. Now, at first I thought I heard my brother walking around, but I looked to see that my brother was already asleep. I didn't even think that anyone else was in the house, since I checked it through every crevice to make sure no one was hiding, and thankfully there wasn't anyone. However, when I went to go to my room, I all of a sudden heard my name being called. Now, I would have at first thought it might have been my mom, but she was in the hospital, so how would that be the case? I ended up just going back to doing what I'm doing, thinking maybe I'm just hearing things. So as I continued to do what I was doing, I ended up looking over to my shoulder to feel that something touched my shoulder. I was a little startled, thinking someone was right behind me, but thankfully there wasn't. I honestly didn't even know what was going on. It wasn't until bedtime when I was already in bed. Still, I was home alone, but while I was sleeping, I was going to the bathroom when all of a sudden, I ended up hearing my name being called again. This time it sounded as if my dad was calling me, but my dad, to keep it in mind, my dad and my mom are legally separated, so my dad, he pretty much lived a couple hours away from where I was. So he pretty much isn't living with my mom. So I looked over and I couldn't find my dad, which is obvious because he was pretty much not there. What I came to the conclusion that while I was home alone was that what I experienced was completely paranormal. So for a bit of context, this happened to me when I was about maybe be 14 years old. Now, this was sometime, I guess, in the late fall of 2012. This was around the time when I was in freshman year of high school. I have been one of the type of teenagers that love to dress up for Halloween and stuff. However, with the enough out of the way, this was sometime before Halloween when I was home alone. Why I was home alone? Well, my mom had errands to do and my dad was at work. So my brother and I were just pretty much playing video games and playing on the computer. However, I ended up deciding to go down to the basement since my mom had said that there was something that she needed or my dad needed down there. I can't remember exactly what it was said or what it was, but I ended up going down to the basement to see. When I got to the basement and grabbed what I want, I noticed that there was a shadow. It looked as if there was a person right where my dad's tools and stuff was. I honestly wasn't so sure if it was some sort of cutout or whatever, but I ended up looking, but I couldn't really tell. I didn't get a good view if it was a real person or not. I ended up going back upstairs with whatever I had, and when I gave it to my mom when she got back, I explained to her of what I saw in the basement, and she said, "No, there was nobody in the basement. I know there was nobody in our house, so why was that brought up?" This honestly really made me wonder if whatever was going on was really just a mind game or was something else. I think that was just paranormal, but maybe my mind was playing tricks. I honestly still don't know to this day, and it still gives me a little unsettling thoughts when I think of it. About a couple years ago, one of my friends actually had this happen to her when she was home alone. Now, her name was Tracy, and she was about 15 years old, so it was sometime back in 2011. When she was 15 years old, she really enjoyed being home alone, as she had been since she was 13, since her parents thought that she was responsible enough. One day she was home alone since her mom had to do errands and also take her younger sister to a sleepover, and her dad was at work. Why her older brother isn't there is another story, but this actually really put her in a spot that made her feel insecure. While she was home alone, she ended up doing her usual things, such as working on some projects for school. This was sometime in the late summer, so of course, school had just started about at least 2 weeks prior when this happened. So Tracy was doing her homework. It wasn't really big homework, but it was definitely some sort of notes and stuff. I can't even remember exactly what it was, but it was, let's just say, it was grade 8 stuff. Now, while she was doing her usual thing, she ended up hearing what seemed to be someone or something in the closet. Now, she hadn't looked in her closet, so she thought that maybe it was just something being moved, like as if something was knocked down. However, within a few moments, the noises continued to persist, and she insisted herself that she goes in to see if there was really someone there. So she ended up going over and opening the door. And when she opened the closet door, she saw what seemed to be a face of a woman. This woman looked to be maybe 18, and she looked really crazy. She looked as if she had been drinking for God knows how long. However, she wasn't so sure as to what it was, but she was really startled and was really unsettled by this. Now, she ended up screaming, going to her parents' bedroom and locked the door, where she had called the cops. The cops arrived within a couple of minutes, and just as this woman reached to her parents' bedroom door, she started to pound and bang on it, demanding her to let her in. The police eventually catches her, and they even tie her up and stuff. And since then, she had been able to be able to come on out. Once she did came out, she saw that it looked to be a woman. This woman was crazy, and she was saying threats and profanities that the police had to tase her. Tracy found out that this woman had unfortunately had mental issues, and she had been breaking into houses every so often. It's not clear as to what happened with her next, but she was taken away and never seen again. Tracy's parents never let Tracy stay home alone until she was 17. And since then, Tracy always made sure that all doors and windows are locked at night. Even then, this story still really has her on edge on keeping herself and everyone else in her household safe.